This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about NVIDIA's newly revealed DLSS 5, Switch 2 getting a handheld boost mode, Starfield coming to PS5, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to the new Beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 129. I am your host, the man who, after DLSS 5 was applied, gained 3 extra nostrils, dropped 50 pounds, and lost 1 ear, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who will now check for the popular opinion online to make sure he tells people they are wrong with the same intensity, Justin, better known as I Am Zeracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been pretty good, I'd say. So last week was my mother and niece and nephew's birthday. So initially I had plans on making my mom some dinner and getting her some red velvet cake. And unbeknownst to me, my sister had plans on getting my mom some dinner and bringing her some cake as well. So I said, okay, you know what? I will make her dinner later on. So, I met up with my sister, my niece and nephew, my brother-in-law, and my mom, and we had dinner together. We had a good time. And while they were there, I gave my niece and nephew their birthday gifts. So I got my niece like a Barbie art kit as well as a Barbie coloring book, and she really loved the art set because she's been really getting into drawing and coloring and stuff like that. And so she wanted to open up right then and there, but she just couldn't at the time. But then the next day my sister sent me pictures of stuff that she had drawn and stuff, and so she really enjoyed that. And then I got my nephew Sonic Crossworlds. And initially I was going to get Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I couldn't find a copy. So I said, he loves Sonic, and you've definitely enjoyed Crossworlds, so I got him that that instead. But then the next day I went ahead and made my mom some shrimp Alfredo pasta bake.
Nice.
So that turned out pretty well. It's my first time. I was trying to replicate sort of the recipe at my at the one restaurant I worked at years ago.
Okay.
I didn't know the specifics, but just by watching how they made it, I tried to copy that, and so I think it turned out pretty decently overall. And then one thing that I have been getting back into the swing of things is just getting into some of my workouts. I've been in a bit of a hiatus with that, but I've been getting back to that, so that's bit of a struggle just because of getting back into like some of the weights that I used to lift that are a bit harder for me to do right now. So that's a thing. Although I will say that one great it seems benefit is the fact that because I work out in the evenings, it ensures that I'm tired, and so it ensures that I actually go to bed at a normal hour. Just because I'm so exhausted, I'm like, yeah, I need to go sleep now because I'm gonna pass out. So that's definitely been a good benefit there. But overall, yeah, that's essentially everything that has happened.
All right. Well, happy belated birthday to your mom and your niece and nephew. So that's cool. As for my week, of course, Thursday, Friday, and about half the day Saturday, my wife and I went on a marriage retreat with our church, and so that was pretty fun. Unfortunately, my wife got sick towards the end of it, but for the most part, I mean, she wasn't like super sick, just started to get a little bit of cold. So that was a pretty good time. One thing I will say, so we decided to take the minivan driving into Branson, and we always take the back way. That's kind of like, it's slightly longer, but it's a lot less traffic because it's not on the main highway. And so whenever we've driven in the past, we always drove our Subaru, and then the Outback is, really good, tight turns and everything, doesn't really have any issues. The van doesn't do quite as well. And it's not like we were in danger or anything, but it's a much wider vehicle and the turning is not quite as tight. And so on some of those roads that are a bit more narrow, it was not quite as enjoyable. And so, mostly it was just, we hadn't really had much chance to really take it on a long trip or anything yet. And so we wanted to test it out. And I basically determined that in future drives to Branson, we're just going to stick with the Subaru because it's much easier to get through that way. But it was still pretty nice. And, there are some nice things about that van. It's different. And I think it's going to be a lot better for the trip to Wyoming. But that one also doesn't have quite so many narrow roads that we'd be driving on. So there's that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else really beyond that. My in-laws left this morning, and for those listening, we're recording on Monday just because I might be getting sick, and so we wanted to try to do it before I get sick so that I'm less likely to be completely brain dead when we're recording. But anyway, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there is. That's been pretty much it. Yeah, I guess the one thing I will mention is so I've been going back and forth on whether or not to say anything about it yet, but what the heck, I'm just going to say it. So my wife is pregnant. And I mean, I already told you, of course, but so our fourth child is on the way. Still pretty early, not quite 7 weeks yet. And I mean, it's not like we have a whole lot of people listening anyway. So we've already told people at our church. But so one of the things with my wife being pregnant is that she has, she doesn't get morning sickness, but she does get food aversions. She's been completely not wanting anything sweet, which is completely contrary to how she is normally. She loves sweets, but she's also been the thing that's been sounding good to her consistently is chicken or spicy chicken. And so she found a place that she wanted to go to for our date night while we were on the retreat, called the Side Chick in Branson. And it's a fried chicken place. Basically they have fried and grilled chicken. And so we tried out that place for our date night. And it was pretty good. It was very good. The food was good. Portions were bigger than I expected, which was pretty nice for the price and everything. Their definition of spicy, though, is not spicy. I mean, so they had a few different ones that sounded like they could be spicy. One was a gochujang chicken, and usually gochujang, at least whenever I make something with it, it's pretty spicy because it just is. But they must have put very little in their chicken because it had the flavor it was delicious. And this was what my wife got, but it wasn't spicy at all. And then I had asked them when we were there, okay, what's the spiciest of the chickens you have? And they told me either Nashville hot or jerk chicken. And it's kind of hard to choose between the two, but Nashville hot is not something I get very often. I've only gotten it once or twice. And so I just decided, okay, I'll go for the Nashville hot. It was definitely hotter than the gochujang, which wasn't hot at all, but it still wasn't hot. And I don't know if their jerk chicken would be any better. I'm guessing probably not. But it did make me want to make jerk chicken, so I made some yesterday. Although, since I kind of guesstimated on the amount of habaneros because I just used some of the pickled habaneros instead of using the whole ones like the recipe normally calls for. So it ended up not being spicy, but I smoked. I just did some boneless, skinless chicken thighs, marinated them with the jerk marinade, and then smoked them. And it came out really good flavor-wise. And then I used some of the extra sauce and just added some habanero hot sauce to it to make it spicier. But yeah. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I mean, obviously the pregnancy is a big deal for us. I mean, it's our third kid, our daughter, it will be almost 8 by the time the baby's born. So it's going to be a
Wow.
pretty big age gap there, because the first 3 are like, it's 20 months between 1 and 2, 18 months between 2 and 3, and it'll be almost 8 years between 3 and 4. But for a long time, my wife was not up for having more kids, and I was never opposed to having more, and finally we got to a point where we were both deciding, yeah, I think we want to have another one, and especially now that our kids are old enough to actually help with the baby and everything, and various other reasons. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. Congratulations again. Congratulations. That was definitely great news to hear when you told me about that. Just something I was quickly wondering. The pickled jalapenos you used, were those the ones you made before, or did you make a new batch?
They're the ones I made before, and they're the habaneros.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
So like how long can they essentially last? Like, do you have to use them within, say, a certain amount of time?
I mean, as long as you seal them properly and refrigerate them after opening, they can last a long time. Like, I had a jar of pickled jalapenos that I had put in the pantry, I want to say in like November or December of 24, and I just used, like, I don't know, a few months ago, and it was still good. So, I mean, as long as you have enough of the pickling solution, which is basically just vinegar, salt, and a couple other spices, it can, if you have it sealed properly, it can last for a very long time. And in the case of the habaneros, I mean, I had already opened the jar a few months ago, but it's just been sitting in the fridge, and it's been fine.
Okay. Good to know.
But yeah. All right. Well, what have you been playing this past week?
So, so the Steam sale happened, the Steam Spring sale happened. I got some games from that. And one of them, I decided to, you know what, I'll go ahead and give it a whirl. And you might not have heard of this game before. It's this one game called Thank Goodness You're Here. And I am pleased to say that it does not disappoint. As you said, even just the initial opening part of the game, and I just thought to myself,
there's a door right there.
That was, oh wow. And then it just went on from there. And then even though you mentioned it to me, it was still just very humorous watching the flowers going, I love you. I love you. And initially I didn't even know that I was supposed to be doing anything, and then I saw, oh wait, I'm supposed to be moving the lawnmower, and then just seeing it progress slowly, getting closer and closer. Oh wow, it's been enjoyable. Now, I am not certain if I've missed some things here and there, just because I know you did mention that there were things that were missable, and as I was partially trying to explore here and there, and so I think there might have been maybe a few, maybe or maybe not, I couldn't enter them, but there might have been a couple buildings or doors or other pathways that I could have explored that I didn't get to, just because I went one way and then it just kept me going straight forward, like entering a building and then ending up on the other side of the building. But you know, I've definitely been enjoying what I've been playing so far, and then just going around and seeing things, especially certain people, and how, like, for example, oh man, I can't remember what his name is, but it's the guy whose hand gets stuck in the grate initially, and then he's stuck in the fence, and then there are the two kids, and if you hit the kid, he hits the guy instead. And so I'm just like, yeah, this game is just very humorous, indeed. So I haven't completed it yet, but I've just had a blast with what I've been playing so far, and I'm very glad that you recommended that before. Next game that I also started up is a game called Viewfinder, and this one looked very interesting. It's a puzzle game, first-person puzzle game, where you sort of warp reality to solve different puzzles. And so that involves stuff like picking up photos and placing them, essentially, and that just creates a 3D version of the photo. Taking pictures, and those pictures are 3D, become 3D objects that you can interact with. And same thing with just also looking through certain images, whether that just be like partial images, aligning them properly so that way they create new parts of reality. So it's very interesting, and you can be very creative with that. And I've found there are a couple puzzles where I feel like I should have gotten this a whole lot sooner, but for the most part, they're not too, they're not too difficult to solve or anything like that. So it's pretty decent as far as the challenge goes. Now, the one downside to this game is going to be the main character. Is more so just like, I guess partially the writing for the character. Because when I saw the game and I started up, I thought, okay, this is gonna be one of those silent protagonist games like, say, Portal or Cube, for example. This character talks, and this is modern day writing.
Oh no.
And by that I mean Forspoken.
Oh god.
Like, did I just explode out of my mind? The character, in the very first 5 minutes, when you first warp reality, she says, "Whoa, did you just warp reality with a photo?" And I just thought,
gosh.
that took 5 years off my life just hearing that. And I was just like, oh no.
Can you adjust the volume levels to like turn off the dialogue?
Later on, I did think about that, and you can actually do that.
Okay, I'm doing that
now
immediately.
it does. Yeah. I mean, it impacts all the other dialogue as well, but honestly, I feel like the story doesn't really matter all that much. I'm really just in there for the puzzles
with
anyway.
that kind of writing, I mean.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so like that's something I definitely learned, and I said, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and just dial that down now. And it made the game a whole lot more enjoyable after that point. But as far as like the actual game though, it is still fun. I do like the mechanics that are being used here. But it's just like that one thing that I'm just like, ugh, did they really have to do that? But still it's fun. But then, of course, I've been playing some more of Hades 2. Been going through some more runs and stuff here and there. I've unlocked nearly all of the different weapon aspects. I still have a few more to get through. I'm starting doing the runs I need for the second fear levels for the second reward. That's definitely been proving to be more difficult than I expected, partially because I think the combination of modifiers have not been smart. Like, for example, I've only done the what's it called? Essentially the boss enhancements for like the first level, so for Hecate and oh gosh, name escapes me, but the Cyclops. But I've only been doing it for them, and so I haven't done the modifiers for the bosses past them. So when I went to Scylla, I didn't realize. I thought, okay, it's just gonna be a stronger boss fight, same stuff.
Goth.
But then I was not ready for that, and I already had a hard enough time with that boss by himself up in the overworld.
Yeah.
Having to face him and the Siren simultaneously. Oof, that was a pain. And then, of course, I had, I think, maybe 2 times for the damage modifier, and then also 3 times or 3 levels of the health modifier. So, they've got a bigger health pool, deal more damage. I've never encountered this before. This blend is not good. So I think what I'm going to do is just readjust some other points and then just work from there. because that's definitely not working for me right now. But still, in all other stuff, I've gotten more things completed. I still, for the epilogue, I have to, from what it seems, it looks like I have to fully max out my relationship with Hecate, and then also possibly max out what I need with Heracles.
Yeah.
And I think that's everything else before I can find the fates, but
Nice.
we'll just see from there. And then, of course, just a lot of stuff is just either completing certain challenges or finishing all the side quests and stuff like that, which, like, yeah, that'll be cleanup stuff, but at that point, it'll probably be I'm moving on to whatever the next main game I play and just do that as cleanup stuff in the meantime. But yeah, still enjoying this and having a good time.
Very nice. Yeah. I found one of the things that was easiest for me as far as increasing for the fear was making the enemies faster and not. I mean, I really can't remember what all the different modifiers were. I'd have to look at find my screenshots. But yeah, I know that making the enemies faster wasn't so bad to where like it made things way harder. And I think I might have increased health, but I didn't do as much. Like I mixed it up quite a bit in the different things that I did to make it work out. But of course, I also had God mode so that I was taking less damage than what you're dealing with. So yeah. But anyway, good stuff. With Viewfinder, I had no idea that it was going to have the modern writing. You like killed my enthusiasm for that game. But I will just turn off the dialogue and the subtitles and then not have to deal with that, because yeah, that's completely unacceptable. Either that, or I'll see if there's a mod. See if there's a mod to just completely turn it off without turning off the other ones. Because if there is, then I would do that. Otherwise, I'll just like I said, make it so that or just turn off the dialogue and the volume for that, because yeah, I cannot abide that garbage. Especially because this is a game that I looked at and I was like, this game looks exactly like, it's like right up my alley with the type of game it is. But yeah, I'm not cool with the modern protagonist garbage. So I'm glad that you told me about that. I mean, most likely, whenever I actually got around to playing it, I would have, figured that out pretty quickly and then turned it all off, because I don't want that. That's awful, though. Of course, it makes me even think more of the Ocarina of Time thing I shared with you. That was so bad. What was I saying? Man. It's like, I thought that the Dark Souls one was bad, but the Ocarina of Time one was even worse. But yeah, okay. Alright, as far as what I've been playing, pretty short list, but it's longer than you would probably expect. So, I'll already say, Thursday, Friday, and like the first half of the day, Saturday, I basically didn't play anything. It wasn't until like later in the day, Saturday, that I actually got time to play. But days leading up to that, I played a bunch of Death Stranding, and I'll get more into that here in just a little bit. But I'll mention a couple other things that I played briefly. So when we were coming back from Branson from the marriage retreat, I needed something to play on the road. And originally I was going to do Death Stranding, but the performance is just not good enough, so I finally decided, okay, I'll just boot something up that I haven't played in a little bit, something that I know runs well, and so I played a little bit of Persona 3 Reload. I basically just got through another segment of the dungeon, and that's the extent of what I played. After that, I stopped and haven't come back to it. But in light of the fact that there is now a PC port of the original Animal Crossing, obviously not official, just, a decompilation / recompilation, I played a little bit of that, and so I tested it out on my desktop and my Steam Deck, and it didn't seem like there was any way to modify the frame rate, but I haven't looked that much into it. I mean, it's just running at 60 FPS, but you can change the resolution to match whatever screen you're running it on. So, of course, it runs perfectly, plays great. Overall, obviously, it doesn't have all the quality of life improvements that you have in the later games, which is really the one downside. Because otherwise it looks it looks perfectly fine. I mean, especially when you consider the fact that it was an N64 game that didn't come out in the US until it came to GameCube. They ported it to GameCube from the N64 disc version. So yeah, I played almost none of it. It basically just played a little bit into the intro, saved my game, and that was the extent of it. Probably not something I'm really going to get into, but I was more just wanting to check it out and get it for my kids to put on their PC because they all really like Animal Crossing, but we only have one Switch where they can play New Horizons, and sometimes they'll play New Leaf on their 3D or the 2DSs, but yeah, anyway. So going back to Death Stranding, I played a bunch of that, particularly between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Saturday, Sunday, and a little bit today. And as of this afternoon, I have completely finished it. I've gotten all achievements, all 63 of them. Even one of those was just getting the platinum equivalent, but so I did that basically a little bit on my laptop, mostly on my desktop, and then a little bit streaming from my desktop to the Steam Deck. And yeah, I truly loved the game. It was an excellent game, and I came to appreciate it that much more, taking the time to get all the achievements and just the amount of effort it took. One of the things I definitely have to say with that is that when it came to getting one of the facilities connected to the UCA and then getting it upgraded, it's one that's like at the very top of a mountain. But initially I tried going up the eastern side of the mountain, which is a lot more steep, and it's like very difficult to get what you need to get up there because of the fact that for one, I didn't think to bring any ropes with me so that I could put a stake down and then have that to climb up ropes. And so it just was a lot harder for me to get up there. And then, of course, you're not connected to the chiral network initially up there, which means you can't build anything like zip lines or anything of that nature. It's basically just things that you can carry, like ladders and the ropes. So that took me a lot longer than it should have just to get up there in the first place, and then from there be able to get it ranked up, which most of the orders that I had to get in order to rank it up were in completely different parts of the map. So it took a while, but eventually I got it. The nice thing, though, is that when I got to the very last one I needed to connect to the UCA and upgrade, it was in the eastern section of the map, which is where you start the game. And so I literally, I chose a premium delivery for the first one. And after I did that premium delivery, it went from 0 to 3 stars. They wanted to get connected to the UCA, so then I popped one achievement. Then I picked up another order for them, got them almost all the way to 5, and then just picked up like an item that had been lost on the ground for them, and then got them up to 5, and that gave me the last achievement on that. And then after that, it was just getting all of the remaining memory chips, which took a bit longer just because they were scattered all over the map, but I did have a map that had them all marked, so I was able to take care of that, and that was good. Getting that over with, and so that's completely done. And because of that, I played very little. I think I played a grand total of about 15 minutes. I guess it's really closer to like 20 to 25 because of an issue I had with the save and because I tested it on 2 different devices. But I played some Death Stranding 2. So, I played it first on my desktop. I just did like the opening mission, which is a really good test for how the game is going to run because it's a huge open area, like massive desert, major draw distance, at least on my rig. And it's a good test of what it is that your computer can do. Now, with everything at native 1440p, very high settings, I was getting, with ray tracing on, which you only have one level of ray tracing to choose, but with all of that, it was doing between 70 and 90 frames per second, thereabouts. Then when I turned off ray tracing and just went back to very high on the ambient occlusion, then it was doing between, I think on the low end it was like 87, and the high end it was getting up to 115. But most of the time it was like in the 80s and 90s, at least for this opening section. And because this is such a big area with lots of lighting and shadows and everything else, it's understandable why it would be a lot more demanding for this opening area. So it's just like, this is like a good place to do a benchmark, because if you can get a good frame rate here, you'll probably get a good frame rate elsewhere, theoretically. But yeah, so I only had the ray tracing on just long enough to see how it did, and then once I turned off ray tracing, the performance went up quite a lot. I mean, still could use some tweaking probably. More likely than not, I will end up trying to get it up to, or try to see if I can get more consistent over 100 FPS. But considering the fact that I really didn't do much of anything with the settings and I basically just kept everything on very high, it's not overly surprising that I wasn't getting more consistently above 100. I did. So, one of the annoying things with Windows 11 is the first time you boot up a software, if you when the game tries to save the data to the hard drive, the SSD, whatever, it will block those changes unless you allow it to make those changes, and I didn't realize it. And so, like, I had basically just played through the beginning, got past the point when you are basically given the more or less the mission to begin the real game, and saved my game, and then I booted up on the laptop because I wanted to see how it performed there, and because it hadn't actually saved the data when I booted up on the laptop, it just gave me the option of new game. So I didn't lose much of any time, but it was still a bit frustrating that happened. So there's not going to be any footage showing here. I'm not 100% positive if it recorded properly. If it did, I'll probably try to include it in next week's episode. There is a small chance that I might be able to do a side-by-side for this week, but we'll just kind of see. So I had to definitely mess with the settings on the laptop since it's much weaker, and getting like a mix of, it was like high and medium. I think I might have put something on low, and then I used DLSS and did I tried a couple different things. A DLSS performance, I think, was getting me consistently over 60. Ultra performance was getting me more consistently over 60, like 60 to 80 range, but didn't look quite as nice. And so that's something I really just got to play around with the settings on the laptop to get something where I can at least get 60, if not better. And I'll figure it out. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say. Oh yeah, they changed some of the buttons around, and so it was throwing me off quite a bit. When I got to the laptop, because of the fact that I knew how some of the buttons had changed, I was able to get those programmed on the QRD controller for the back button so that it matched what I'm used to. So then I could at least start playing things the same way that I was before. But really, apart from that, I haven't done much of anything. I haven't even had a chance to go into any combat yet. It's basically just been doing some basic traversal, picking stuff up, putting down a ladder. Really, that's the extent of what I've done so far. But yeah, I mean, the game, especially on the desktop, looks gorgeous. It is really visually stunning. And I mean, yes, of course, it is obviously going much more for realism, than most games. And so take that for what it is, but it's still a very good looking game, and it runs very well considering how the visuals look. And all this without DLSS 5. It's just whatever, I think it's DLSS 3 probably is what it's using since I have a 40 series mobile graphics card on the laptop. And then on the desktop, I wasn't using any upscaling at all, just doing native resolution. So if I tried using FSR, I could probably get better performance, but realistically, with as high a performance as I was getting at native, even with ray tracing on, I'm not too concerned about using any sort of upscaling. But yeah, once again, I'll have to mess around with settings a bit and see what's the best balance for me. I think desktop, I will probably not use any upscaling because I just don't think it's needed. And the laptop, I definitely will use upscaling. Or at the very least, dynamic resolution. Maybe do like a balanced upscaling with a little bit of dynamic resolution to maintain 60. I don't know. I'll have to play it around with it, see what I can come up with. But yeah, that is everything.
Nice. Glad that you got through the rest of the achievements. I know that's definitely something you discussed for quite a while about hoping to finish. And just in time for Death Stranding 2, so hey, you can definitely get started with that. I mean, obviously you've only just started, but are there any new details that you've noticed mechanics wise in this game that weren't in Death Stranding 1?
Not yet. Really the only thing I've noticed that's different is just that, like, Death Stranding 1, to like pick up chiral crystals, you had to hold down X. Death Stranding 2, you just press Y. So they changed that, which I think it's a positive change. It was just different. And the other thing I think that's positive that is more just takes a little getting used to is that the button for scanning on Death Stranding 1, it was mapped to the right shoulder button, which was mostly just awkward for like when you're driving, because I typically use my index finger for pulling the trigger for driving. And so it was just kind of a little awkward from that standpoint, which is why I mapped it to one of the back buttons. But on this one, it's mapped to the left button instead.
And I was just curious, was there any particular reason why you chose the eastern side for that one mountain? Was as far as like with trying to climb it, were any of the other sides more hazardous because of, say,
no, it was
like enemies, right? Like
plain and simple. It was just because I happened to be on the eastern side, and so it's like this is the most direct route from the looks of it. But then I discovered, as I was trying to get up there, that it would have been a lot easier to just go all the way around and then climb up the eastern side, or from the western side, instead of going up from the eastern side.
Okay. All right. Oh, and one last question I actually had. With Animal Crossing, how was that pretty as straightforward as other PC decomps, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, very straightforward.
I might get that set up at some point then. Because because why not?
Right.
And you've tried it out on Steam Deck yet, or
Yeah.
just desktop?
Yeah,
Okay.
the footage I have that's playing right now is recorded on Steam Deck.
Okay. Yeah, I might have to go ahead and just go ahead and get that started. Add that to my list of decomps to begin working on.
Right.
But
Yeah, the only thing
stuff.
I will say is that I'm not sure if it was, I don't think it was the whole time, but I did notice that there was a glitch at one point where my shorts disappeared and I was just invisible. Like those part of my legs were invisible. So, but it's still technically a work in progress. I think there was like a couple minor glitches too, but it was nothing significant.
Okay.
All right. Anything else before we get into the news?
No, sir.
All right. So one of the big things that came out this past week after the last time we recorded, which I haven't had an opportunity to test out yet for myself, but the Switch 2 has had a much requested feature added to it, which makes it so that when you're playing Switch 1 games, you have the option to turn on handheld boost mode, which basically just makes it so that instead of games playing in their handheld resolution, they play in the docked resolution while playing in handheld mode. So basically, games like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which looks like garbage in handheld mode on the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, with handheld boost mode active, you're getting the docked visuals, making it significantly better. And of course, the added power of the Switch 2 at least makes it maintain 30 frames per second. Obviously, it would be better if it was actually getting 60, but it's still better. And, games that previously may have struggled to get or maintain 60 frames per second that actually had the ability to get that high now have the ability to do that on the Switch 2. So, once again, I haven't had a chance to test any of these out yet, but what are your thoughts?
Obviously, I think this is something that probably should have been included day one. Being able to get the extra visuals is definitely a huge improvement. And then while you were talking, you said something, and I think I might have just or I might have just somehow added this into my mind when I first read this or saw it, but I thought that performance also, as far as like frame rate, was improved with it, or if it was treating it as if it were docked, for like the games that were able to get 60 in docked mode. I thought that carried over, but it looks like, from what I'm seeing now, looking at over stuff again, it's not the case, and it's still just the same frame rate as handheld, unless I'm wrong again.
What it is, as far as my understanding, is that, because I don't think there's really any games that had differences in the frame rate between handheld and docked, other than the fact that it was a lower clock rate, and so you might have less consistent performance. But I think that otherwise it's just running in docked mode, but in handheld.
Okay.
So whatever advantages you get should be there in handheld.
Okay. Well, I still think that this is a positive. I think being able to get the better, at least visuals, if not the better performance as well, is definitely a plus. And sure, that could cause a bit of, more drain on the battery and whatnot. But I think that's a bit of it's a small price to pay for, taking advantage of the actual hardware you paid for.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't really make sense to buy such a powerful handheld and still only get the previous gen performance if you don't have to. So I think that's definitely great. And I definitely think that's good. Um, do I think? I mean, for some games it might not matter, especially if there were certain games that I'm certain were playing at 60 as it were already. But no, I think that would it could help with possibly negating some games needing like a Switch 2 version. I mean, obviously, if they're going to get better textures and stuff, that having a Switch 2 version would definitely help a lot. And if there were games that couldn't get 60 FPS on the base Switch, even in docked mode, then having a Switch 2 version also would help. But for the games that didn't necessarily need it, I think that that's definitely good to have there. But I think overall this is pretty good, and because it's just an update, and it applies to all games across the board. So it's not like you have to, I have to go and download some sort of patch for this game or that game, or I have to pay for this upgrade or that grade. No, it's just a universal application for your game. So I think that's good. I definitely can't wait to hear what you think of with games, especially with if you go back to some of your other games and let me know how that works. Especially when you mentioned, was it Xenoblade Chronicles 2 that you mentioned, which just looked awful on the OLED screen?
Yeah. Well, it's
or
just,
no, not the OLED screen, but just
in handheld mode. Period. It looked terrible. I only tried it on the original Switch, but I mean, it was just so low resolution and blurry and just awful on the original Switch. At least in handheld. Yeah. Docked it looked fine. Like, it looked pretty good, but handheld it was awful.
Although, what was the one game though that you said it looked decent on the OLED screen, but then just playing it on the Switch 2 screen, handheld screen, it just didn't look
pretty much every.
It's still that
every Switch 1 game. Okay, every Switch 1 game without an upgrade looked terrible because of the fact that, or at least mostly looked terrible because of the fact that it was running at not only the same clock speed as the original. Well, I don't know if it was running the same clock speed, but it couldn't go above 720p 30 FPS unless the game had already been designed to do that. And so it was basically half the resolution stretched out to fit the 1080p screen.
Not a good experience, obviously. But but I definitely look forward to hearing what you have to say when you get around to trying out some of those games.
Yeah.
Although, what do you think will be the first you try?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I would say, what do you think will be the first game you try?
I mean, I might boot up Xenoblade Chronicles 2 just for the sake of being able to see the difference. Because the reality is, like, that game, that actively was the one thing that really made it hard for me to enjoy it as much. Now, granted, I had my own complaints about the game in general, but the handheld visuals were just by far the worst part of playing that game, which was a shame because it was like, I was super excited about it. Of course, I got it day one. I played it. I put a bunch of time into it, but it was just absolutely terrible. So I might check that out, but beyond that, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I might boot up a couple other games just to see how they are. Like, maybe I could see myself trying out. Let me look at my library over here. I know one of the games that I'm kind of curious about, which I know is not going to be dramatically different apart from definitely looking better, is Starlink Battle for Atlas. Because what I played of that game I actually really liked. I thought the gameplay was pretty fun. I mean, it's, Ubisoft kind of stuff, but at the same time, it was still a pretty fun game loop, and getting something that looks and runs better than it did before would be nice. But let's see here. I wouldn't mind at least checking to see how Octopath Traveler 2 and Triangle Strategy look with that improved visuals, or the improved visual fidelity on those. I still, wouldn't play them there, especially because I already bought them on Steam and, played Triangle Strategy on Steam Deck, and then Octopath Traveler 2, I, played a little bit on Steam Deck, and of course it's obviously 60 FPS plus much better visuals for both of those. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is something that would end up being better as well. But I don't know. There's a lot of different games that could be really good. I think when it comes to what I would actually be playing there, is basically anything that just doesn't look good in handheld mode, period. If it doesn't look good in handheld mode, period, on the OLED or otherwise, then I would play it on the Switch 2 and, do the handheld boost mode. Or if there's, like, inconsistency in the performance. Like, for one, I've heard with Bayonetta 3, which I still haven't played, because I want to replay 1 and 2 before I play 3, that it doesn't maintain 60 frames per second super well anyway on the original Switch. And then on top of that, in handheld mode, it's not the best. But Switch 2 with the handheld boost for when you're getting the docked performance and everything, plus you have a much stronger device, so it should be able to maintain that 60 frames per second. But apart from that, like, if the game already looks really good on the OLED screen and there's no difference in performance between the Switch 1 and Switch 2, I'm going to stick with the Switch 1 playing in the OLED. But one thing I will say is that if this performance mode had existed on the Switch 2 when I first got it, I probably would not have bought a Switch OLED again. Because that, even though, yes, I did want games to run better on the Switch 2, it was the fact that they ran the same and looked worse that really made me not want to play them on Switch 2. So I don't have any regrets having bought the Switch OLED, because the games I've played on it have been really a lot more enjoyable, and there are plenty of games from my Switch 1 backlog that I would rather play there still, just because they run the same and don't necessarily look any better on the Switch 2, even though some of them will at least look better in handheld mode than before. But it's not a big enough deal from that standpoint to where it would convince me to suddenly get rid of my Switch OLED and then play everything on the Switch 2, because the OLED screen is still a nicer screen, even if it's lower resolution. But like, especially the 2D games, like the Phoenix Wright games, and the a lot of the 2D like platformers and that sort of thing still look really good on that OLED screen. And while they might look, they'll definitely look better now on the Switch 2 screen than they did before. If they were already running at 60 frames per second and already looking really good on the OLED screen, I don't really see a point in playing them on Switch 2. I'll just use the Switch 2 for the games that take advantage of it more. That's kind of the extent of where I am with that. But either way, I see this as a very positive thing. I'm really glad that Nintendo did something positive. I still wish that there was a way to just have more games actually get the genuine performance boost that they should have, beyond just getting a stable 30 frames per second, which is like, this hardware can easily do 60 on the majority of these games. But, of course, they're not designed to do that, even though the power is there, for sure. So, it is what it is. But I think that's pretty much it for my thoughts on that.
Same here.
All right. So we got this DLSS topic. You want to do the honors?
Sure thing. All right. So, in case you haven't heard, NVIDIA came out last week with a presentation talking about DLSS 5, the future of DLSS, and yeah, it's been something. They showcased several different games in particular, that being Resident Evil, I know it's 9 Requiem, Elder Scrolls Oblivion remastered, Starfield, and I think one other game I can't remember or not, but
FC,
FC,
the football club.
Oh yeah,
FIFA equivalent.
So they showed off these games, and the games honestly looked like, for lack of better words, they looked like an AI filter that people use on real life photos, or if they try to, or if someone's going to beautify video game characters and whatnot, then that is essentially what it looks like. Sure, some shadows and textures look better, but as far as the character models themselves, not so much. And there have been other things that have been pointed out, such as like the DLSS 5 mistaking a shadow for a nose, and so one character has a wider nose than he should have because of that. And in general, I think most people have been upset about that and spoke out against it. Oh, also, despite the fact that NVIDIA partnered with Capcom and Ubisoft to, showcase these games as far as presentation, apparently the devs at these studios did not know about this. So, for example, here in an article from Insider Gaming, after speaking to some devs from Ubisoft and Capcom, they did not know about this. And one Ubisoft developer said, "We found out the same time as the public about DLSS 5 being implemented." And so, also Capcom has previously had a very strong anti-AI mindset, especially with Resident Evil Requiem. And so the fact that they then come and partner with NVIDIA to showcase this, which, again, looks like an AI filter has been put on there, is definitely telling. Now, of course, in the midst of this backlash, Jensen Huang, NVIDIA CEO, he says that gamers are wrong for criticizing it, and says that this is completely optional for devs, and that they can change it, adjust DLSS 5 to how they want it to be. And also he said that DLSS, the reason why for that is because, as I have explained very carefully, DLSS 5 fuses the controllability of geometry and textures and everything about the game with generative AI. It's not post-processing. It's not post-processing at the frame level. It's generative control at the geometry level. Now, however, another video came out later on, and I think it was, I wish I had that article pulled up, but it was either a statement or a video that showed that it is not just a geometry level setting. It really is actually 2D, so it's more like a filter. Yep. So it is not actually controlling the geometry, and even if it were controlling the geometry, that means it's also impacting how the game has been designed already. Now, there's definitely a whole lot I have to say here about this, but before I get into my thoughts, what are your thoughts on this wonderful new technology that we're getting?
Well, when it comes to Jensen Huang, don't believe his lies. He is a liar, and I know that, like, Daniel Owen was one of the people who had, I can't remember if he reached out to NVIDIA specifically or if he just read the information from somewhere else, but I know he covered a lot of this. And like you said, it's not even doing anything with the geometry, the 3D models themselves. What it is it's taking a single frame and then applying essentially a filter to it. And I have heard some people who actually were positive on how this looks, but no shade being thrown. I'm not going to name any names. Those, I mean, typically the people who have been praising it the most are those who just don't understand technology very well. And it's, I mean, like I said, once again, I'm not throwing shade at these people. Like, I get it. You don't understand the technology, especially when you're more on the console side. You don't know NVIDIA's history so much, especially because the consoles don't use NVIDIA, with the exception of Nintendo. But the stuff is just, it's complete lies of what it's actually doing. And so it's not actually doing anything with the 3D models, taking into account what's there with the 3D model and how it, I mean, you're trying to maintain any sort of consistency. Instead, it's basically applying a beauty filter to the different things. And while sometimes that makes the lighting more quote unquote realistic, sometimes it just basically makes it like there's studio lighting in every scene. Like it's models, standing in a studio with all the lights coming from every direction to make them look extra pretty and whatnot. And because of the fact that it's not taking into account what's actually there with the geometry of the 3D model itself, and instead is just taking like a single 2D frame and then applying its filters, there's not any guaranteed consistency with it. For people who are not quite understanding what I'm saying, if you've ever watched some of these AI generated videos, whether it's like a realistic version of a classic video game, or it's like one of those videos where it shows this is the actor back when they made the movie originally, and this is the actor 40 years later, what they look like now, or what have you, you'll notice that there's always something just a little bit off about it. And then sometimes from scene to scene, they don't even look the same. Like, I've noticed, especially when I've seen like some of these, this is if they were to remake Final Fantasy VI in modern day, with the modern day visuals, and in one scene they'll have the character looking really, really cool, and it's like, oh, that looks really neat. And then the next scene, they don't look the same. And it's because of the fact that you're dealing with, AI is just trying to essentially make stuff up. Like they're taking maybe like the 2D model picture or whatever, and then they're trying to interpolate based on the information that they have what this would look like in real life. But because of the fact that they're not focusing on being consistent, you end up with differences. And if you do that same kind of thing with video games, with modern day video games, and you're doing it on the fly like that, which of course, on top of, never mind the fact that this was taking two 5090s, two very expensive graphics cards, which are even more expensive because of the RAM crisis, taking two 5090s to develop this, or to make this work in real time. Even if you discount that, you end up with a situation where you have the way it's being applied is going to be different from frame to frame. And sometimes it's applied well, and sometimes it's not. And then other times it just gets things completely wonky. Like the one that they did for FC26, and they made the characters face look more realistic or whatever. But then like it shows him kicking the ball, and then the ball just turns into like this wobbly mess as it's flying because it's applying it frame by frame. But the problem is that it's not able to do it fast enough for the amount of frames. And so you just have all these various issues. Then you have the way that it's looking on different characters. Sometimes the characters end up looking like nothing like what they looked before, because it's essentially applying a beauty filter. It's like when people take modern day video game characters and they say, and then they put it into Grok and say, make this character look attractive. And that's essentially what they did with like Grace and other stuff. The only one that was like even close to being accurate, apart from being given all the studio lighting, was Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil Requiem. But the rest of them were all like just not quite right. And you have like the hair being different on one side of the head than the other side of the head for a character from Starfield, and one character basically looking like he's been given a third nostril, if you look closely enough at the picture, and just all this other stuff. And for one, this is something that just realistically it's not going to happen in real time. It can't happen in real time. They're saying that they're going to make this possible to run on a single GPU. It's like, even if they could make this sort of run on a single GPU, it's not going to do anywhere near what they're saying it's going to do. The fact that they're having to do this with two 5090s, two of their top-of-the-line graphics cards, it may even be the 32 gigabyte versions of the 5090s, which is insane that it is that much power all in one thing. Even if they manage to get this working in some form on a single 50 series GPU, the reality is it's not going to do anywhere near what they're advertising. At best, I mean, it will probably be better than DLSS 4 because it's been improving DLSS as a technology in general for upscaling. I think that DLSS is a very good technology, apart from the fact that I don't like upscaling because it's being used as a crutch. But when you get to the point of applying these AI filters on top and you're changing the artistic vision of these characters, the geometry for the characters is basically being completely changed and they don't look the same as the original characters at all. And then on top of that, you're also having just all this stuff that just doesn't, I guess I'm kind of repeating myself, but basically what I'm trying to say is the TLDL, I don't like this. I think it's bad. I don't think this should be included in video games, and I know NVIDIA is trying to push it because they're trying to sell more graphics cards. NVIDIA is the big reason why this whole AI thing is happening, why the DRAM prices have gone up so drastically, and they're trying to continue to sell you their hardware by advertising these things that aren't even going to work as well as they say they are. And even if they do, quote unquote, work as well, the developers are not happy with the results, and they are requiring so much more horsepower than anybody has in their computers. And I think that's everything I have to say.
Oh man, so I'm glad you said that, and I thought about it later on, but I forgot about it. But I'm glad you brought it up about how the tech demo was running on two 5090s, one to run the game and the other one to apply DLSS 5. And the fact that it looked the way it did using two 5090s is just insane, because like you said, the average person is not going to have two 5090s, let alone one 5090. I mean, and you're saying that that's what it takes to get the games running as they were in the presentation. And as you also said, they're going to try to get this running on one single graphics card, and that would apply to, lower models, obviously, because probably 1-2% of people own a 5090. So it's insane that they're demanding this, but I think it really just is. I'm getting to the point where I think that DLSS was a mistake. I mean, yeah. I remember back when I was in college and they were first on DLSS, I was like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. And this was back when I was even, still, slight edge phasing out of my Nintendo fanboy period. And I was like, hey, that would be pretty cool, since Nintendo's working with NVIDIA, maybe the next Nintendo console will have DLSS. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be pretty cool. I like this technology. I think it's gonna be pretty good. The problem, though, is like you said, it's being used as a crutch instead of just making games or helping to improve the performance of older graphics cards or graphics cards that are on the lower end, like say a 4060 or maybe a previous like a 30 series or like a 20 series GPU that has tensor cores, but might not necessarily be as stronger as newer cards, then that would be good to give them that performance boost and still have them look pretty decently as well. But the fact that we have modern games that are running or I can't remember which game specifically, but I think at least with Monster Hunter Wilds, the fact that as part of the recommended specs to run the game at 60 frames per second, you also had to have DLSS applied. So like these devs are not, of course, obviously part of the problem with Wilds is the fact that it's an open world game in the RE engine, which is a horrible combination.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have modern games that in order to hit 60 FPS, you need to use DLSS. That's ridiculous. I mean, if you're using older RTX cards, sure, fine. Especially if you're trying to get, like, say, maybe even 1440p. I think there's something wrong with that. But if we're using 4060, or not 40, but 40 series cards, especially if it's like a 4070 or 4080, or we're talking about 50 series cards, we should not be talking about DLSS. Unless we're trying to, say, play at 4K, and, get a high enough frame rate and also maybe apply ray tracing, then we can talk about that. But that's not something we should be talking about if we're using modern graphics cards. That just makes no sense at all, because we should be expecting pure, powerful rasterization. Like, out of the box, because of the power of this GPU, I should be expecting this performance. That's the way it has been. So I think it's just pitiful. And the fact that, I mean, of course, the RAM crisis has caused them to not be able to put out any new GPUs, but the fact that NVIDIA is not talking about, hey, here's our next line of GPUs that provide better performance for you. It's rather, hey, here's the next upscaling crutch that we have to give you, because we can't give you better GPUs because we would rather just give you upscaling instead, and not worry or not go through the effort of making a better product. So it's just been a smaller, gradual jump, I would say. Like it's sort of like we've been seeing a slower jump in performance from generation to generation. I mean, like, obviously from, say, the 900 series to the 10 series, and then to the 20 series, and then to the 30 series, I would say we've seen some very large jumps here and there. And then, I remember, I think it was when the 40 series launched, or was getting ready to launch, Jensen said that, I think it was the 4060 was twice as powerful as a 3080 or something like that, but it turns out it was also because it was using DLSS and possibly like frame generation. I'm just like, yeah, that's that doesn't really sound right there, Jensen. No, I think it was the 5060. I think that he said something like that, and even still, regardless of that, it was just like, now that just doesn't sound right at all. Like, how are you gonna say that that card's more powerful than the 3080? But it's just because, again, you're just using a bunch of DLSS to help compensate for that, and your frame generation. And I think that, upscaling it, like I said, is fine for weaker cards or older cards, even if they are in the higher ends, but you shouldn't be expecting to use that out of the box when you start a game. And I think frame generation is an even worse blight, because you're creating all these fake frames, that it adds latency and it's lag, and so it's just a mess. One thing which you mentioned before, which also is something I want to talk about, is how, because it's being randomly, or it's using AI to generate these images, I thought someone said something that made me think about, because it's AI generated, would that mean that what one person sees using DLSS 5 is different from what another person sees using DLSS 5?
Right.
Because it could be generating something else entirely.
Yep.
Because it's like you said, it's just pulling stuff randomly. So, the textures that one person has could be different from another person. So that is just another issue there. And even though I am ragging a bunch on NVIDIA, I'm not going to say AMD is innocent in this as well, because they've been trying to. I mean, granted, the one blessing is the fact that AMD is not as good as NVIDIA. That's actually the main blessing, because I feel like if AMD was as decent as their upscaling as NVIDIA, we would be in a worse situation. But I think because of that, I mean, sure, AMD's been improving it on in their upscaling attempts with FSR, but I think that's partially why they've been able to have pretty good performance boosts with their current 90 series cards, just because of the fact that we can't do FSR, so that as well as DLSS, so we've got to do something halfway decent. So that's been the one thing, but I think AMD is definitely going to try to get there at some point. They've been slowly trying to make improvements there, and then also Lisa Su, CEO, is trying to also get more into the AI space as well. So it's just going to be a matter of time, but at least because AMD is just so slow at this type of stuff, it's going to be a while. But at some point, they are going to be doing the same thing that NVIDIA is going to do. And at that point, it's just like, well, that was a good run, everyone. But yeah, I despise this, and I think that this is absolute garbage that belongs in a dumpster. And it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm hoping that there's just continued pressure on NVIDIA, and I hope that even people are going to vote with their. I mean, I'm not going to expect them to, because that's partially what landed us into some of these positions in the first place. But I'm hoping that people are going to vote with their wallets and be like, you know what, NVIDIA, no, enough is enough. First off, you put us in this RAM crisis to begin with. So don't go thinking that you're going to be the hero and say, hey, we've got DLSS 5 to help save you all. And it's like, no, this is garbage. It's like, you're going to beat me with a stick and then give me a band-aid and say, here you go, buddy. And I'm like, no, that's not going to fix the problem. Just put out better products and stop pushing this AI garbage on us. Like, that's all you need to do, and it'll be good. And who knows? Hopefully this AI bubble will burst. I think that's gonna be the one thing that could help us at some point. But I feel like NVIDIA also is partially starting to look into their next venture, because now they're talking about space. So I'm just like, all right, before it was the gamers they went to, then it was the crypto bros, then it was the AI bros, now it's gonna be the space bros. So yeah, well, see you in the next 5 years as Jensen Huang has GPUs for space. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, something else I was thinking about is a big part of the reason why these types of things even come up are really just because, especially on the console side, and once again, I'm not trying to throw any shade, but they want things to look more and more realistic, because to them, that's how you move things forward. But the problem is we've just kind of hit diminishing returns already. Like, PS4 gen games already looked really good. Like, significantly so, and it very much has gotten to the point where, well, yes, things have gotten better in the PS5 and Series X gen in terms of how realistic things can get. Performance has also gotten worse. Budgets have gotten ridiculous. And it's just getting to the point where it's just not sustainable. And furthermore, it's something where so many people are just not as interested in anymore outside of the console space, because the console space, they just want more realistic games. And in some cases, frankly, it's not even so that they can play the games, it's just because of list wars. It's the console warring stuff, and who has the best looking games, who has the most quality cinematic stuff. And on the PC side, it's much less the case. And that's not to say that there's nobody on the PC side that wants realistic. And obviously, like, it's not as though none of us want games to still look really good, really realistic and all that. None of us want to push our hardware. I mean, obviously, like, I love doing that. But the games that interest me the most, 9 times out of 10, are not the games that look realistic. It's the games that have unique art styles or have art styles that remind me of like old stuff like Nintendo 64 and even PS2 and GameCube and all that stuff. The stuff that's 2D retro style, all of that. That kind of stuff is more exciting to me a lot of times than the realistic looking things, because the realistic things just don't have as much, I guess, personality to them necessarily. And depending on how much they're going for realism and being cinematic and everything, sometimes it ends up being where it's very much at the expense of the gameplay. Like, the gameplay ends up being very samey from game to game. Ubisoft is very much this way, where a lot of their games are very samey. And it's not necessarily that they're all bad. Like, I still enjoy the formula to a degree. And honestly, those games, I typically don't care about the story. Like, I really just don't. And sometimes it gets a little bloated too. That's very true. But like the Sony games, they're so heavily story focused a lot of times that you have, like, Black Desert came out recently, or not Black Desert, Crimson Desert. Crimson Desert came out recently, and the main reasons why it's getting such low scores from so many journalists are because the story sucks. And not that it's actually bad writing in terms of, oh, this makes me mad, or it's disrespectful characters or things like that. No, it's because it's just not well written. But it's not like millennial writing where it's poorly written. It's just not engaging, and it's not cinematic. It's a beautiful looking game, and from what I've heard, the controls have some issues, although I guess they've at least supposedly fixed some of that. But most people who've been playing the game, who like actually just enjoy playing games and don't care about the story and the cinematics and all that other stuff, have said this game is really fun, and it runs really well on most things outside of Intel GPUs, and I think Steam Deck's gotten better, but it's still not great. And yeah, it's just such a divide between what it is that you see from people who want this level of realism and people who don't. And the last point I wanted to make, I think another reason why, because of all these people who want that realism, a lot of these people think that somehow PlayStation 6 is going to be on the same level as DLSS 5, as these dual 5090s doing all this work. And I just wish that it was easier to get through to people who just don't understand the tech and don't understand that this is just not even remotely going to be possible with their consoles. At least not anytime soon. Now, PSSR has gotten better. Everything I've seen is that essentially the 2.0 version of PSSR is much better than the 1.0 version, but it's still nowhere near the level of DLSS, even 4.5, or even going to 4. It's not even as good as DLSS 4, but it's improved a lot. But none of them are going to be up to DLSS 5, because DLSS 5, even without the AI Instagram filter that they add on, is probably still going to be much better technology. It's still going to work a lot better in terms of, at least when we're talking just purely about upscaling. We're not talking about adding any additional filters on top of things, just basically making it work when you're rendering at a lower resolution and outputting at a higher resolution. I wish it was easier to help people understand, no, this is not what you're going to get on consoles. At least not anytime soon. Eventually, it'll catch up, but by that point, PCs will be far ahead of that, because that's just the way it goes. And there's nothing wrong with that because, like, these games on consoles still look really good. It's just that they're not giving you the same thing you're getting on PC. And it's not that... I think one of the hard things is trying to express me telling you that this is not on the same level isn't me saying your hardware sucks. This is just me saying I'm trying to help you have a more realistic understanding of how this works. Because you can be, like, I can be perfectly content with the fact that my Steam Deck is much weaker than other hardware. It's even probably weaker than the Switch 2. But I like the Steam Deck better as a piece of hardware. Similarly, your PS5 Pro, while it is the strongest console currently, isn't as strong as a powerful PC, and that's fine, because it doesn't have to be. Enjoy it for what it is, just try to understand that it's not on the same level as a high-powered PC, but you're also spending a lot less for it, and, you know, there are trade-offs, no matter which direction you go. You know, PC, you have a lot more freedom, but it's also going to cost more money. Console, you have a lower entry cost, but you're going to have a lot more additional costs piled on top over the years, and as a closed ecosystem. But if you already have all your digital library there, then you're going to be happier there because you don't have to buy games over again. At least not until they charge you for a remaster. So, all that being said, the end of all of this is that DLSS 5 sucks, at least in terms of the AI Instagram filters, and it probably won't do quite what they're saying it'll do, but what it will do probably well is just the same stuff that DLSS has been doing prior to this. Though, of course, they're probably going to end up being like, we're going to do fake frames for every one real frame, and that is garbage as well. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it.
I just want to quickly comment and say that that's actually a good point about anyone who thinks that this will be applying to console as well, because it just won't. Because, like you said, Nintendo's the only console manufacturer right now that is using NVIDIA tech. Everyone else is using AMD. And, you know, whatever AMD has at present, even with Sony implementing their modified version of FSR with PSSR, it's still not going to be any better than what AMD is currently able to offer. So, and AMD is not touching NVIDIA with DLSS, so don't expect to get that type of quality or that level of quality. Just look at what AMD's doing with FSR. I think they're working on 4.0 right now. I haven't checked on what they're doing because I don't worry about that. But
I'm sorry, you said for AMD or for NVIDIA?
For AMD. For AMD's FSR.
Yeah, AMD, it's like 4.1, I think, right now.
Okay. So, yeah, like, that's what you could expect at best, but even then, you would have to wait for Sony to work on that and add that to the PS5, and by that point, AMD's already going to be working on the next version of FSR. So, don't look at NVIDIA and say, like, this is what we can expect. Look at AMD instead, because that's what you're working with. If anything, like I said, Nintendo guys, they could look at that, but that would just depend on a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Nintendo, though, is that even though they're using NVIDIA, because of the form factor and everything, they're still going to be significantly limited on what it can actually do. I mean, it's a dramatic improvement over what they had with the Switch 1, but it's not going to be able to do any of the DLSS 5. I don't even think it can do DLSS 3. It's probably like DLSS 2 is what they're doing.
Okay.
And even then, it's a game-by-game basis, because not every game uses DLSS.
Or probably even needs to use it, for that matter.
Yep. All right, anything else before we move into the last topic?
No, sir.
All right, so the last topic we have for tonight, it's a pretty small one, but also significant. We've talked for quite a while about the possibility of Starfield making its way over to PlayStation 5. We knew it was going to happen eventually, and it's been officially announced. It is dropping on PS5 on April 7th of 2026. What are your thoughts?
I think obviously this is great news. Glad that it's finally come over. More people get to play this. I think one of the better news about this is that the price is going to be much cheaper than it was at launch originally. So it's gonna be it's gonna be releasing for $50 or £45 for the standard edition, and $65 or £61 for the deluxe edition. Additionally, this price drop is also applying to Xbox and PC as well. So if you haven't bought it before, you're gonna pay this price now, and I think that's definitely great because if a game has already been released before, I see no point in charging the same price for people, later on. I think at that point you should drop it, and that's something that Sony probably could have learned with their PC ports, and that could have helped their sales. But I digress there. But I think it's definitely great that this is coming over, and there are also going to be the two pieces of content, like the performance mode and also the visual mode, which will help with frame rates and then also graphic fidelity. Although the latter hasn't had its full details specified yet, but I think all in all, though, this is a good bonus. Glad that they're also going to actually add in that support for the PS5 Pro, so that way people can actually take advantage of the hardware, and it's not just a lazy minimal port. But yeah, I think this is definitely a good thing overall, and maybe at some point, if Bethesda can do it, maybe try to see if they can get it running on the Switch too. But
I think they can pull it off. I mean, they were able to get Oblivion Remastered running on Switch too, so if they can do that, I think they could do the same with Starfield. I mean, it's only going to be 30 FPS probably, because I don't think it's as demanding as Oblivion Remastered because of the fact that it's not using Unreal Engine 5, but it's still, it's been pretty demanding. I mean, it's definitely got a lot of optimizations since it originally launched, but yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely, I'm very much in favor of this. I've said for a long time that I thought it should come over to PlayStation 5. Of course, the thing that I find funniest about this is, of course, all the PlayStation fanboys who were ragging on how terrible Starfield is and everything when it was an Xbox exclusive, Xbox and PC exclusive, now are excited to be getting it on PlayStation. And I mean, I wish more people would just be honest about it and say, I will be interested in this one if it ever comes over to my preferred platform, but until then, I'm just not gonna, I'm not gonna play it. Instead of being like, oh, this game sucks because it's not on my favorite plastic box. I mean, I think about the PlayStation titles that are not on PC. And I've made it clear, when in the past, before all of this stuff about potentially PlayStation games not being brought over to PC anymore, that there are some games I'm interested in and there's some that I'm not. If they come over to PC, some of them I will probably check out, and then others I'm not sure I really want to play it. And, games like Wolverine and Ghost of Yotei. I mean, Wolverine, I would love for it to actually have a good story, but if it doesn't have a good story, I'm not interested, because I hate so much what Insomniac did with Spider-Man 2's story that I refused to support it. And that wasn't even considering the quality of the port, which I think they fixed the game on PC, but even if they have, because of how dirty they did Peter and even Miles, and how overpowered they made Mary Jane, and just the entire direction of the story, just so terrible that I don't even want to touch that game. And Ghost of Yotei, it's just, it's a repeat of the stories they've already done before. More revenge bad with an angry feminist, essentially. It's like the revenge bad storyline. While yes, revenge is bad, it gets old when you do it over and over and over. When they did it with God of War 2018, I actually appreciated it. I thought it was a good story. But then they did it with The Last of Us Part 2. And now they're doing it with Ghost of Yotei. And it's just like, it gets really old. It's just the same thing over and over. And like I said, Wolverine, I just don't trust Insomniac after what they did with Spider-Man 2. So if they prove me wrong, then if the game comes to PC, I would buy it. But if they don't prove me wrong, which I have a feeling they're not going to prove me wrong, then they're not going to get my money either way. So it doesn't matter if they bring it over or not. But the thing is that I'm still willing to be honest about these things. Like, if I'm interested in the game, I'll say, hey, I'm interested in it, but I'm not going to buy the platform just to play that. Like Sunset Overdrive was the one game on Xbox One, that made me very seriously consider getting an Xbox One back in the day. And I waffled on it for years. And then finally, the game came to PC, and it's like, okay, I'm definitely not getting an Xbox One now. I still haven't even played very much of the game. I mean, I think I put maybe an hour into it. And I liked what I played, but I just haven't gotten to it. One of these days, I do need to boot it up, because it runs pretty decently on the Steam Deck. And I mean, it was, like I said, it was fun what I played. Plus, it's one of Insomniac's games that's actually quite good. Well, most of their games have been good, but yeah. So, regardless of any of that, I am glad for those on PlayStation who were not ragging on Starfield, dishonestly, that have been just waiting for the PlayStation version, or have decided to wait, and now they're getting rewarded for waiting. Now they have an opportunity to play it. What I played of Starfield, I liked. I definitely had some issues with the game. I never actually fully finished it. And someday I'm hoping to go back to it. I'm hoping maybe at some point they can actually optimize it to where it can actually run reasonably well on the Steam Deck. But at least I know now that even if it can't, that streaming to the Steam Deck is completely realistic, since I did that a lot with Death Stranding. But that's about the extent of what I have to say about that.
Yeah, just going off of your comment about honesty with games, I definitely agree with that. I mean, even back when I was a Nintendo fanboy, there were still games that I looked at and I was like, man, I wish I could play this. Like, I always wanted to play Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, but it's like, that was only on the PS2.
Yeah.
And, I even said to myself before, I said, at one point, maybe I'll get a PS4, because Bloodborne looks good, and, oh man, I can't remember what the other games, but essentially there were a bunch of other games that I just couldn't play because they were not on a Nintendo platform. Even there were third-party games like Batman Arkham Knights, or Transformers Devastation, or just a bunch of other games. It's like, I didn't hate these games. I wasn't like, oh, these games are horrible,
Yeah.
This Bloodborne game, yeah, what type of this? This is just like some sort of edgelord game. Oh, wow, man. Who wants to play in Victorian, England anyway? It's more like, wow, this game looks great. I would definitely love to play this game. I just can't. And
Yeah.
part of it's just because of my fanboyism that won't, let me buy the console. But it's more like, I would play it if I could. I just can't. But yeah, just like be honest about that and just say, yeah, this game looks good. I just can't play it. Like, Unicorn Overlord, I would love to play that game. I would purchase that, but that game is only available on consoles, just because Vanillaware does not port any of their games to PC whatsoever. But I don't think it's a bad game. I don't think it looks bad or anything. I would only play that game on PC if they port it over. So that's just the way it is. Just say you would like these games to be on your system, and that's it.
Yeah.
If you would like to have one game, I mean, especially with certain PS fanboys who might say something like, "Oh, we've got all these Halo killers," but the moment that Halo drops on PlayStation, it's like, "Oh yeah, we're buying Halo, guys, day one."
Yep.
We're gonna show these Xbox guys how it goes. Or they even did the same thing, I think, with like Gears of War, and then when that came to PS5, people were buying it on there. So it's like, it's not that you hate these games, you just hate the platform they're currently on.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be honest about that.
With you bringing up Bloodborne, that just made me realize something that I hadn't thought about. Is that now that I've found that Apollo and Moonlight works really well for streaming games to the Steam Deck, that's going to be a good way to play Bloodborne whenever I get around to going back to it. Because it's like, that's where I would rather play it, is on the Steam Deck anyway. I mean, I like playing it on my desktop for sure, but it's like, if I can play it on my Steam Deck, even if it's just streaming it. I mean, it's been such a good experience with the streaming that I think that would work pretty well. So I might have to try that out next time I do that, but we'll kind of play it by ear, see when that happens. But yeah, good stuff. All right, anything else before we close out for the evening?
No sir.
All right, our recommendations and dissuasions. Start us off.
All right, so a couple recommendations from me. And the first one, it's gonna be funny coming from me of all people, but it is going to be to parent your children. Now this isn't necessarily talking about anyone in particular directing it, but I think that for many people, they aren't really being the parents that their children need, and essentially you are opening up to someone else to be the parent for your children, or something else to be the parent for your children, and that might not be great for them, and that that person could be someone with malicious intent. So definitely be the parent that your child or children need. They're your children, so they are your responsibility for that. So that's my first recommendation there. On a lighter note, several of these are for Viewfinder. The first one is going to be, if you're playing the Viewfinder on the Steam Deck, change the shadows from ultra to high to improve performance. Initially, it runs at somewhere between 40 to 60, but once you change that setting, you'll get a pretty locked 60. And you could probably, it can go higher than that, but at bare minimum, it's going to be doing about 60. So definitely just make that one change and you'll have a good performance overall. Second thing is going to be to disable the dialogue audio, because that dialogue is just cringe. And it's I wish I knew that going in, but no. Once you turn it off, though, it's a much more enjoyable experience, and similar to Portal or Cube, it's just a nice puzzle game. Of course, Portal has dialogue, but it's not bad dialogue though.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So it's more like Cube, where there's no dialogue and you just play the puzzles and whatnot. So definitely do that. And then one more for Viewfinder is, if you're playing on desktop Linux, change the Proton compatibility to 9.04 or whatever the version in Steam is. For some reason, it does not work for me out of the box, or at least it boots up, but the game doesn't appear at all. And it wasn't until I changed the Proton to that version that the game worked properly. So yeah, that's the only other change I would have to say about that. But yeah, those are all my recommendations.
All right, good stuff. Yeah, Viewfinder I definitely want to check out at some point, but now that I know about the horrible, horrible dialogue, I will definitely be muting that. And I'm sure that it won't be detrimental to the actual writing of the game otherwise, because If it's all as terrible as the main thing is, then it's probably just all gonna be bad. So it's like, I'll just enjoy the puzzles, because the puzzles look like fun. Looks like my kind of thing. Good stuff. All right, my recommendations. First of all, in Death Stranding, if you want to get all of the UCA, everyone connected to the UCA, and which includes the first prepper, make sure that you go to him from the west side of the mountain instead of trying to go from the east side, because it's just way easier. You will save a lot of time going that way around. Now, you can always go down the east side of the mountain, just like set up ropes so that you have an easier way to get back down, at least until you have the ability to connect the network and actually be able to start putting up various structures that will actually enable you to get down faster. But until then, just take the long way around, because it will ultimately be shorter. And then my other recommendation is for the restaurant Side Chick in Branson, Missouri. If you're ever out there, it's a great restaurant, really good food, good portion sizes. So much so that like I didn't even get to eat. I didn't eat very much of what I ordered, and I had a bunch of leftovers, and I got basically 2 more meals out of it. So it's like nice. It's not spicy, but it is delicious. So that is what I have for recommendations. So let's go into dissuasions.
All right, so my dissuasion is going to be, do not buy Crimson Desert. Now, outside of performance and whatnot, I think how the devs have treated, have handled, discretion, or rather just being courteous of the consumers has been poor. I mean, they didn't tell Intel users that the game was not supported until after the game released. And additionally, the game, or rather, even though they said that they would offer refunds for people who pre-ordered the game as a result, that's something they should have said ahead of time.
Yeah.
Not wait until after people have already pre-ordered the game and after the game has released that you say, hey, by the way, we are not supporting your GPU. And additionally, they could have even said something beforehand, because Intel even offered to help with support for Intel GPUs, but they declined support while the game was in development. So I think being honest and open with something like that is important for that type of trust that consumers have. And sure, they've come back and said that they are going to remove the block for Intel GPUs and work on compatibility. But, I think that's something you should still be open about beforehand, even if you say it's not available at launch. It's that type of thing that, people should be aware of before they make a purchase. So even if the game runs better, I just think that once you burn a certain level of trust, it's really hard to get that back. So even if the game performs well or decently, I just think I don't know if I can necessarily trust you in the future. So like for that reason, initially I was going to just say for Intel users, but after they went ahead and said we can work on support, I still think that as of right now, just don't buy the game, get it cheaper, or at discount, because obviously they were not trying to be completely transparent with everything, as it were. So that's the reason why I say just don't buy it, at least right now.
All right. Fair enough. My dissuasion. So first of all, I'm going to say don't try to play Death Stranding 2 on the Steam Deck, because although I didn't test it myself, I have watched what other people have done for the testing, and it runs like garbage. Like, it's typically in the teens for frame rate. Technically, there is a way to get a much improved frame rate using a specific mod, but the problem is that it's not in any way officially supported. It's not on like Nexus mods or anything. You're basically downloading something that modifies the EXE. So I've seen some performance, and they were able to get like in the 30s and 40s, which is pretty good for handheld, but I don't know how secure that is, and so I can't recommend doing something like that. On another side with the dissuasions, I'm going to say don't play Death Stranding 1 on Steam Deck, at least not natively. It's great if you're streaming it from a PC, but the performance is just not consistently good enough. Like, if it could get a consistent 30 frames per second, I would be able to say it's worth doing because that's playable. But when it's dropping into the teens, that's not good enough. It's just not. So I'm gonna say, yeah, don't play the first Death Stranding on Steam Deck either. At least not natively on the Steam Deck. That's what I got.
Good to know.
All right, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel, I am Xeracon, that's IAMXERACON, so youtube.com/@IamXeracon. Still working on the one video there, and this won't happen anytime soon. This will definitely happen after I put out that video, and it still might not happen for another month or so, but there is a sort of series of videos that I want to make that would happen over the course of the year, might even extend into a little bit of 2027, but it's just something that is a fun, small little thing that could happen on a weekly or even bi-weekly basis, depending on how I feel about things and scheduling. That would be good for me as is like a small challenge, but also it might get people interested in other games or games they might not even be aware of. So that's something that I will try to work on in the somewhat near distant future. But then I have my other channel, Justin's Bible Blog. That's at Justin's Bible Blog. Due to, the delay with the birthday stuff that I had planned, that sort of bumped back when I was going to work on things for my one video, so that still has not come out yet, and I'm definitely going to try to get that out this week. So I hope to get that finished up and whatnot, but that is also still in the works there. But yeah, that's everything though that I have.
All right. Well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. I haven't put out anything new in a while, but my hope is that this weekend I can finally get some stuff recorded. It's just been the past several weeks I haven't had an opportunity to really do it, and when I've had the opportunity, I have been just worn out. So my hope is that this weekend, with it being like an open weekend with nobody, like my in-laws are not around and we don't have anything planned, that I can just take some time to get some stuff recorded, even if I just get one video recorded to start, get that controller review finally done, and hopefully get to work on my next PC related video. It's still kind of a TBD on how soon that'll come out, but if I can get it recorded, that's the main hurdle. That's the first thing that has to get done. Once that's taken care of, the rest of it is a lot easier. So it's just a matter of getting that part done. Then there is the YouTube channel and Rumble channels for the podcast. On YouTube, that's at the Orange Box Podcast. On Rumble, it's not a custom URL, but you can still find our podcast there. The video version of the podcast goes live on those two channels every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time, barring any technical issues. And then the audio-only version goes live on all major audio podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and others. And that goes live at 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday, barring any technical issues. If you'd like to contact us, you can send us an email to theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com. You could also comment on the video version of the podcast about anything you have to say, whether it's a question, comment, you want to tell us to Persona 3 ourselves, or anything else. And if you send that over, we'll be sure to read it on the show. Otherwise, even if you never write to us at all and you're just going to lurk for those handful of listeners we have, we're going to keep recording this every week. We're going to keep doing this, talking about video games. It's how we catch up from week to week, and it's a good outlet. So, regardless of anything else, we've been going strong for about, 2.5 years? Yeah, 2.5 years. No. Yeah, about 2.5 years, roughly, give or take. I think it's like 2 years and 5 months. But the point is that we've been going for a while, plan to keep doing it, good time, and all that good stuff. So, I think that's everything. So, last chance. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zaracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, use DLSS 5 to make yourself look pretty. Orange Box Podcast, out.